Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Barakahakodash, Barakatum. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone who rule and teach well. And peace and salutations to you sincere Akim out there, pushing this word in truth and sincerity to the four corners of the globe. May you brothers endure until the end. This is the brother Ra'aya with another video, and I'm going to start it off in Jeremiah chapter 49 verse 20. Therefore, hear the counsel of Yahweh that he had taken against Edom, and the biblical Edomites are known today as these so-called white people. Your Americans, Europeans, British, Russians, Australians, etc., etc., and his purposes that he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. And that least of the flock is referring to those Amalekite Edomites over in the Holy Land right now, calling themselves Israelis, which for the rest of the video, I'll be referring to them as the 1948ers. They're not the true people of the book. The true people of the Most High are the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today, the real children of Israel. But as it says, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. These 1948er Amalekite Edomites are going to do something to create a war with Iran, whether they strike Iran directly or create a situation to get Iran to strike them so they can justify themselves into going to war against Iran. And that's going to draw out the United States of America and these other NATO nations in on the side of the 1948ers, and on the side of the Iranians, it's going to draw in their allies like Russia and China. And this is going to play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon over in that Middle Eastern region. And I opened up the video with this verse to preface an article from the nationalinterest.org titled, Deal or No Deal, Iran-Israel War is Coming to the Middle East. It seems increasingly likely that Israel, those 1948er Amalekite Edomites, will strike Iran to prevent the Islamic Republic from acquiring nuclear weapons. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. And when we see articles like this, we know that we're living in the last seconds of these last days before the end of this current age of the rulership of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites, before the ushering in of the kingdom of heaven under the true children of Israel. And that kingdom of heaven will last for eternity. And this battle is in the Valley of Jehoshaphat is going to mainly kick off after the MOTB, the Charagma in Revelation chapter 13 verses 16 to 18, which is the RFID/NFC MICROCHIPIMPLANT is mandatorily implemented. And we can see in the news as well that with each passing day, we're getting closer and closer to the mandatory implementation of the Charagma in Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 18. So like we always tell you sincere Akim out there, now more than ever is not the time to get weak. We can see the finish line to the kingdom of heaven right before our very eyes. So you should be doing everything you can right now to have all 10 toes down in this truth, pushing this word as hard as you possibly can to make your calling and election sure and be of that first fruits, that elect number in the kingdom of heaven. And I'm going to jump around in this article a little bit just to get to the main points. Iran, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett warned on June 12th, is dangerously close to getting their hands on a nuclear weapon. In an interview with The Telegraph, the premier pointed out that Iran is enriching uranium at an unprecedented rate. Bennett added, Iran's nuclear program won't stop until it's stopped. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Bennett isn't alone in expressing concern. The United States has also raised alarm, and the United States is going to be the main ally for those 1948ers that's going to get dragged down into the Valley of Jehoshaphat, which the United States of America already has a military presence in that Middle Eastern region, in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Syria. as it says in Joel chapter 2, verse 20, and I will remove far off from you the Northern Army, the North American Army, all branches, the Navy, the Marines, the Army, the Air Force, etc., and will drive him into a land barren and desolate, that Middle Eastern region, more specifically Saudi Arabia, which is going to be the main staging ground for this battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. In a March 2022 hearing of the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator Jack Reed observed that Iran has made key advances and has decreased its nuclear breakout time to several weeks from a year compared to what it was under the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, colloquially known as the Iran nuclear deal. Indeed, in April 2022, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that Iran's breakout time was down to a couple of weeks. And now I'm going to jump down to this paragraph right here. In June 1981, the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, successfully took out Iraq's nuclear reactor, and in September 2007, the IDF carried out a strike against Syria's nuclear program. Israel has been clear it will not tolerate a hostile power acquiring nuclear weapons, but this time promises to be different. So if the 1948ers had already attacked Iraq's nuclear capabilities as well as Syria's nuclear program, what makes you think it's going to be any different with Iran? But the main difference is that this is going to play into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, that war of Armageddon. And remember that Iran is the main target of not just the 1948ers, but also the United States of America in that Middle Eastern region. They want to balkanize the Middle East and make all of the 1948ers' enemies weak in that region, so they'll be the strongest hegemon there that nobody can stand up against. Look up the Oded Yinon plan. Unlike the 1981 and 2007 strikes, Israel faces a more difficult security predicament. The Islamic Republic has proxies wrapped around Israel like a snake. Lebanon's Hezbollah and Gaza's Hamas are funded, trained, and equipped by Tehran, and both have documented histories of using human shields. Hezbollah alone is widely regarded as the most well-armed terrorist group in the world and maintains a global presence with operatives in dozens of countries, and it has carried out attacks against 1948er communities worldwide, murdering hundreds. Hey, but how many people have these 1948ers murdered, especially those Palestinians over there, as well as a lot of higher-ups in Iran's government, as it's about to go into. Similarly, Iran is also deeply embedded in both Syria and Iraq, with capabilities to strike Israel from these satrapies. In recent weeks, Israel has carried out several targeted assassinations in Iran itself, taking out top Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC operatives, as well as nuclear scientists. It is not the first time that Israel has taken out high-level targets inside Iran, but the increase in strikes, nearly half a dozen in less than a month, suggests a shift. And how long are you going to poke that bear before it strikes back? Ditto for Bennett's vow to implement the octopus doctrine. The Israeli Prime Minister recently stated, "We no longer play with the tentacles with Iran's proxies. We've created a new equation by going for the head." By letting Tehran know that it can and will be struck, Israel is changing the rules of the game. Jerusalem is no longer content to mow the grass, an expression for strategically limited strikes, but is upping the ante in response to what it sees as a growing threat. You pretty much get the point with this article. But again, as we can clearly see, biblical prophecy is taking place right before our very eyes. The least of the flock is definitely doing what they can to draw them out. And eventually, the match is going to get set on that fire, and everything's going to explode, playing into the bigger battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat. the War of Armageddon, in Joel chapter 3, which we're going to go to. This is Joel chapter 3, verse 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, the heathen Gentiles, the Edomites are so-called white people, the Ishmaelites are the so-called Arabs, the Elamites are the so-called East Indians, the Moabites are the so-called Chinese, etc., etc. Prepare war with Iran, World War III, the battle in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, the War of Armageddon, nuclear war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. And an example of this is a recent military exercise that Israel conducted called the Chariots of Fire, which it says in this paragraph right here. Israel has also stepped up the scale and scopes of its strikes in Syria, recently hitting the Damascus airport. The IDF recently held the largest military drill in decades, dubbed Chariots of Fire. In its own words, the exercise aims to both increase the IDF's defensive readiness and examine its preparedness for an extensive and prolonged campaign. And wake up the mighty men, let the men of war draw near. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen. The 1948ers, the United States of America, that Northern Army, Iran, Russia, China, these NATO nations, Turkey, you name it, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Yahweh, and those mighty ones are the death angels of Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai, waiting to get the go-ahead to release this destruction, which is mainly going to happen after the Charagma is mandatorily implemented. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, which is Yahweh's Shaphat in the Hebrew, or Yahweh's judgment. For there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about. And when you go up to the first couple of verses in this chapter, you'll see why Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai is gathering these heathens down into the valley of Jehoshaphat to judge them for afflicting the apple of his eye, the children of Israel, who are again known as the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans today. And at the top of that list of these heathen nations that have come against the children of Israel are you Edomites, as pursuant to Psalms chapter 83. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of Yahweh is near in the valley of decision. And with articles like that and a bunch of other news that's been coming out lately, we can clearly see that the day of Yahweh is very near in the valley of decision. So that's it with this video. And with this video, I hope you sincere Akim and Akwath were edified. Just keep strong. We're almost out of this final wicked captivity of the heathen nations, chiefly of the Edomites. And as always, I'm going to say Abad Babal, Kwam Yasharala, and until next time, Shalom.